Here we
All
are.
right. All right. We're live and stuff.
You can hear me. I can hear you.
I can hear you. You can
Everyone else can hear us. And Forsetti is working on restarting his computer, which then prompted a Windows update.
because why not?
Yes. Because that's technology for you.
Yes. Oh hey.
Oh hey.
Oh hey.
We can hear you.
And we can hear him.
Yeah, because I'm on my phone.
Oh, okay. Forsetti, do you want me to turn off your video?
Yeah, please.
Or can you want to turn off your video? I don't know how you're comfortable since you are an anonymous blogger.
Yeah, you can just turn camera off at the top of your screen. I don't know what it's like on your phone, but
There should be a little video icon and you can tap it off. There you go.
Cool. There you are.
There I am.
There you go.
You shouldn't have been on screen long enough for anyone's microwave to track you, so you should be fine.
So, I am Amy.
And I'm Derek, and I'm having drinks with Amy. And this is I guess this is like technically the beginning of season 2.
This is our first episode of 2017.
Yay.
And next Wednesday is the anniversary of our first episode, the 1-year anniversary.
That's awesome. Excellent.
So Derek, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking scotch because it's been a drinking scotch kind of week. So I am drinking my favorite scotch, Oban, because Oban is the scotch that Scotch would drink if Scotch could drink scotch. So that is what I'm drinking right now. And what are you drinking, Amy?
I am drinking rum and pineapple juice because after being 80 degrees last week, it is now like 25 degrees, and I'm just like hoping that if I drink some rum and pineapple, I can like magically conjure some warmer weather.
There you go. Drink warm thoughts.
Yeah.
I like it.
What are you drinking?
I'm doing my best to fight malaria, so I'm drinking gin and tonic.
Nice. I didn't know that gin fought malaria.
Like you legit have malaria?
No. Did have malaria. No, the tonic, that's what they, that's how gin and tonics got started as a combination, was the British Army in India to fight malaria, to get them to have the tonic. The quinine was put in the tonic.
Wow.
You learn something new every day.
I did not know that. Wow. I love trivia. Excellent. So, Amy, do you want to introduce our guest?
Sure. So, this is Forsetti, and he's a blogger. And he's more than a blogger. He's a philosopher and a historian and an all-around pretty cool dude. And oh gosh. Has some pretty awesome and interesting things to say about philosophy and theology and history and race and Christianity and politics, and I think that covers it. And we are here to talk. We are here to face oppressive Christianity, and sort of talk about the different theologies and dynamics of across Christian history that have been kind of shitty, and that have contributed to slavery and racism and the Tea Party and the alt-right white supremacy and all that jazz. All that opposite of jazz.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to start, if you don't mind, Forsetti, just telling us a little bit about your background and especially your background in terms of history with the church.
Well, I'm 56-year-old, white male. I was born in Salt Lake City. I spent my younger years either there or in southeastern Idaho, in a small rural community, a town of about 1,300 people. The entire county was about 4,000 people. It is completely dominated by the LDS Church.
Hmm.
And that's where I grew up. So that's what connects into a form of fundamentalism, but I understand some people get like a little, when I wrote my article, they got a little upset because they claim that's not really Christianity, which is a whole different issue. But
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go there, but
I mean, doesn't it have Jesus Christ in the title? Isn't it?
yeah, yeah. But, and I mean, it's not just where I was raised. It's also since then, where I've taught a number of classes, world civilization courses, philosophy, religion courses, things like that. So I have a little bit broader knowledge than just the Mormon Church.
Yeah. Awesome.
So,
do you belong to a church? Are you affiliated with a church? Is there any particular community that you jive with now?
No.
Okay. Me neither. No, I'm just kidding. Pretty much.
So, based off of that experience, how would you? So I'm kind of going off of the piece. I'm looking at a piece that you wrote. One piece in particular, on rural America, understanding isn't the problem, and which I found incredibly fascinating, really well written, really captivating. Can you talk a little bit about how what you've experienced either directly in your growing up experience or what you've experienced in your studies since? How does that affect the dynamics that we see in rural America right now? How do you see religion playing into the culture, if you will, of rural America?
Well, it is the culture of rural America in this area. The church is a lot of times the cultural center. Particularly like where I grew up, everything you did almost was centered around some church function for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to keep you busy and involved. So everything you do before and after school, sometimes almost every day of the week, and somehow to a church function. So they have their say in about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get the public office if you're not a member of the church.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, you're not one of the city fathers if you're not a member of the church. And it's not just there. I mean, I have, acquaintances and friends who have grown up in rural areas in the South and other places where it's the same thing. It's just a different form of Christianity.
Mm-hmm. So
it's these little bubbles that people live in that they want to protect that bubble, and so they can every aspect of the community in order to do that.
Yeah, I think of it like an anthill or a terrarium. like those ant farms you see that people can keep in their house, where it's like a dissected anthill, and you can see all little tunnels and everything, but nothing can get out or in.
Yeah, that's
a good analogy. One of the things that again, I'm just kind of looking at their article because I found so much of it to be compelling. This idea that white Christian God is king, and I find that just that language, I find that compelling. Describe white Christian God?
Well, I mean, look at all the pictures of or God in any of the white Christian religions, and they're all white.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's just the way it is. I mean, so they view that, and so when they say that, you know, we are the sons and daughters of God, we were made in His image, they take that literally. So when they see a white picture of white people, we are the ones who were made in His image, and anybody who's not white, somehow there's something wrong there. And that's an image that is done intentionally and has carried a lot of weight for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So when I said, you know, the white God is king, it's like I meant that in every possible way, because, you know, he's God, or he's, you know, it's Jesus the Savior. He's the king,
Mm-hmm.
but he's king in the sense that, you know, this is who, you know, we view as we're His loyal subjects, and we're the ones that look like Him.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea really came over from Europe with European colonization of the Americas.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I mean, for me, a major turning point in Christianity is the point where Constantine converts. So the Emperor of Rome becomes the head of the church, basically, and the religion of Rome becomes Christianity, and then Christianity becomes a tool with which the Roman Empire can continue its domination of Europe. And so I'm, you know, particularly curious about the ways that this idea of a white Christian, or, you know, this white God king, very hierarchical, paternalistic figure, like how that personality or archetype has played itself out in history, particularly, you know, with the initial colonization, the expansion of colonization, and the continued colonization of America. I don't know if there's anything in there about that you want to speak to, but that's the part that's really fascinating to me, is that, you know, people forget that this country was founded by Puritans who were extremists, and that a lot of that mentality is in the DNA of our culture and this country.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, there's two major religious groups that came to America from Europe. The first were those who were fleeing from religion because they were sick of it. And the second were the ones who were so fanatical that Europe basically kicked them out. And I mean, it's true. And so, unfortunately, you know, the group that were so crazy in Europe, the Europeans were like, listen, you know, our whole system's based on religion. You guys are nuts. Those are the people who, you know, became they're the Puritans, they're the Calvinists. They're the ones who have survived politically in this country ever since, in some form, and they've been given deferential treatment ever since. And it is very frustrating because it kind of is antithetical to the whole original idea of America. Like, they've kind of subverted it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that very fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's kind of terrifying. That, I mean, because that's not. I mean, really, it is. It's actually it's basically the opposite of the picture that is usually painted about why people came to the New World. We think of them as seekers of religious freedom, and not so much the folks who were so radical, so unorthodox that everyone else was like, you've just got to go. And actually, where we are now is sort of the culmination of that kind of thinking, being given free reign for a couple centuries.
Well, yeah, it's the problem is the whole notion of people came here for religious freedom. That's correct, but it's incomplete.
Sure.
Mhm.
Well,
Yep.
there's an asterisk there, and the asterisk is some of those people came here to wanted freedom to be even more strict than they could be, even more fundamentalist than they were allowed in Europe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
They were sorry. They were seeking their own religious freedom. They weren't like establishing a land for free people
No, absolutely
to
not.
believe whatever they wanted. It was like, we're going to this place so that we can create a colony of people who think just like us, and then like convert anyone else who's around
Well, absolutely.
the right way.
Well, look at how they treated the Native Americans.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
You know, I'm trying to write an article right now because ever since we talked a few days ago, Amy,
Uh-huh.
been thinking about this issue, and fundamentalist Christianity has really been at the core of not every, but almost all major moral failings in this country. From genocide to slavery to Jim Crow, fundamentalist Christianity didn't just have its hand in it; it was orchestrating it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
it's been on the wrong side of justice every time.
Every time, every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the idea of white male God, and I think it's really important what you said earlier, is that if white people see themselves, and particularly white men see themselves made in the image of God, and everyone else not, or made in an inferior image, then you can justify all sorts of things. You can justify slavery because they're inferior people. You can justify Native American genocide because they're inferior people. You can justify colonization all over the world because they're all inferior people. And by divine right, you get to show your superiority to them.
Absolutely. And that's always been true. I mean, and that's why, I always just think, like, isn't it amazing how, white male Christians say that they're on top, and you ask, why is that? And it says, well, because white male Christians said so.
Yeah.
And not just white male Christians, but again, going back to ancient Rome, like powerful,
wealthy landowning,
right? Like men in power who wanted to stay in power, who needed to uphold a certain hierarchy that actually wasn't so rigid in the early days of Christianity. And so, it's like, oh, well, women are superior because they were made from Adam's rib or some whatever, and women are inferior because Eve bit an apple, whatever. Like, come on. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, well, who wrote the books? Who translated the books?
Mm-hmm.
Who made them as
canonized the books? Who decided that those were the books that were going to get put into the book?
Well, they were every single time they were men almost, so it's kind of easy to put yourself at the advantage, like, oh, well, my group is the one that should be in charge.
Right. Well, and here's what's terrifying to me right now is in 2017, as of, I don't know, 2 days ago, you have a congressman from Iowa in the form of Steve King, basically saying all of these same things in current modern day language about we are protecting our culture our superior, and by superior he means white culture, from Black and brown people. I mean, this isn't like some outdated, well, it is outdated, but like this isn't some far off notion here. This is something that is just to bring it back into, like, this is present, this is real, this is very current.
And it's particularly current as we track the shifting of the Republican platform over the last 30 or so years. So I'm 32. Like, over the course of my lifetime, the Republican platform has gone from 0 mentions of God to double-digit mentions of God, or allusions to faith, policies that are rooted in a fundamentalist understanding of Christianity. And to me, that's really terrifying, because it leaves it creates a lot of shame for Christians on the other side of the aisle. Like, I know so many progressive Christians that are like, I'm ashamed to call myself a Christian because of the way Christianity is understood in the dominant culture and the way that it's embodied and touted in Congress. I mean, and
well, it's used as a cudgel to beat people over the head, and right has masterfully used it that way, because race is something that, I mean, it's been around forever, racism, and so it's something that people can look at and they can grasp on a superficial. Well, this person doesn't look like.
Are you having cat problems?
No, I'm. Yes, I am. Sorry about that. Continue.
It's like you're the BBC guy.
So, if people don't look like me, then I don't have to treat them like me. And that's an easy thing, because people it's very tribalistic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a lot older. Yeah, and I'm a lot older than you. So in my lifetime, like, I was raised an Eisenhower Republican.
Mm.
Now, if you look at the 1956 Republican platform, I mean, it's almost to the left of, the 2016 Democratic platform in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's frightening to see the transition. Now, there's a reason why that transition has taken place. And that's because of the Civil Rights Act in '64.
Right.
And it's very clear on why that divide happened and why. So it's not, to me, it's not right now it's Republicans, but the problem has always been, in this country, for the most part, has been the white Southern male, evangelical belief system.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the problem, and we've never dealt with it. We tried to deal with it in the Civil War, and we thought we did, but Reconstruction failed, and it failed miserably.
Mm-hmm. And
when it failed, it allowed them to regain their power and impose Jim Crow. So we've never fully addressed, America's racial past and its problems and its roots. And it keeps rearing its ugly head. It just morphs, whenever something happens, it just morphs into a different system. Jim Crow gets done with, and so we pass the Civil Rights Act. Well, then you get, redlining and mortgage practices and all these other things in the prison system. So it's just a new way to do the same thing. It just morphs into a new way, but the underlying problem is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, go ahead, Amy.
It's kind of like, I feel like cancer is a really good analogy. Like, on a spiritual, psychological level, it's like, you have these normal looking cells, and then they mutate, and all of a sudden there's cancer, and maybe you treat it in one area and that area heals, and then it crops up in another place, and then before you know it, it's metastasized, which is where I feel like we are now. Like, this cancer of white supremacy and Christian fundamentalism, and not just Christian fundamentalism, but like you were saying, this notion of this white male king God is at our state, it's in our city government, it's in our state government, it's in our federal government. Like, this has been a decade-long takeover, basically, of the government at all levels by a group of people who did this intentionally with complete disregard for anyone else's experience or story.
Well, it is like cancer, but the problem is we don't want to treat it with the necessary chemotherapy, because chemotherapy is not fun.
No.
It's painful, and it's shooting poison to the system, but it gets rid of it. And we as a country have never wanted to do that. And part of the reason we don't want to is because the non-racist whites still are reluctant to call out the racist whites and stand, and that has always been the problem. It's like, you don't want to look at your uncle and aunt across the dinner table and say, being racist, and I'm not going to tolerate your BS anymore. People are reluctant to do that. And the media is reluctant to do that as well. I mean, look at how many euphemisms they come up for, even like with Steve King recently with those comments. I mean, they go out of their way to like, well, he said it this way. And like, they don't ever want to say like it's a bigoted or racist comment.
Right.
Like, they can't bring themselves in. And part of the reason is they don't want to offend their white base.
Yeah.
So,
or their advertisers, or their board of, their.
That's right.
So it's the people who sign their paychecks.
Right. So there's no chemotherapy being placed in every. It's like, we're using crystals and sea salts to. And it's like, come on.
Well, and this goes to a point that I think is really comes out in your article, and that honestly, this is something that has been rubbing me the wrong way since the election. One of the things that I think a lot of people on the left internalized was the notion that we just need to get out of our bubbles so that we can understand how the other side thinks. And I just think that is complete and utter bullshit, because a lot of people who live in liberal parts of the country were raised in red states, were raised in rural fundamentalism and conservatism, and purposefully moved to cities, purposefully moved to coast, purposefully moved to places where, yes, you are a primary example of this, Amy, and I am the same. Of like, I moved from my conservative evangelical suburb and moved into the city. Like, I just find it. This is part of the chemo that we're not willing to do, as if there's some sort of moral equivalency to, my bubble includes Black people, white people, Hispanic people, queer people, trans people, and the bubble of a lot of my conservative friends only includes white people. And I'm the one who needs to get out of my bubble. That's crap. Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent there, but I do think that's
what this show is for.
that's part of the problem of this conversation. And it really comes to what's frustrating about it is because, I think, Forsetti, part of what you say in your article is that, like, a lot of the logical appeals don't work because these systems are made to protect identity, and they're made to protect those bubbles that a lot of our rural conservative friends live in, and to keep anything foreign from permeating those bubbles.
And it doesn't have to be rural. Like,
Mhm.
I live in Kansas City. It's like a greater metropolitan area of like 2 million people or something. Like, it's not small.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, it's pretty segregated. I live in a suburb right now at my parents' house called Prairie Village. And the nickname for Prairie Village is Perfect Village. And there's this stereotype of like, you know, like the perfect soccer mom with like the long blonde hair and the Lululemon pants and whatever. And it's like this neighborhood or this part of town is also a blue dot in a red state.
Mm.
And it's like, for me, there's something in here about not only do white people who are aware of racial bias and aware of white privilege and aware of racism, not only do we have to kind of like name what's happening when we see it, but I feel like there's some deeper inner work about facing our own privilege and like really learning the practical tools for how to use that privilege that we just don't really have resources for. Like, I'm not trying to make excuses or anything, but I feel like a lot of white folks that have really good intentions just honestly don't know how to talk about racism.
Well, no, because they've never really spent any serious time contemplating it and looking at all its implications and the roles that they've played in it, you know, covertly or overtly in the system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's something to say like, okay, listen, I recognize the advantages that have that I've done nothing to earn by really the fact that I was born a white male.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice to say that, but then you have to look like, okay, well, what do I do? Now, this reminds me, like, one of my philosophy professors when I was in grad school, you know, he used to always say, you know, philosophy grad schools are just littered with white men. There was rarely a female grad student and rarely anybody of white. And he said, you know, we really need to make it a concerted effort to do this. And one of the things that I can do in order to, you know, bring this about is I can retire early. And he did. And I was impressed with that. You know, he's willing to say, I've benefited from this system. Here's how I can pay back into it to help those not like me.
Mm-hmm.
So he positioned earlier, like 5 years early, they should have, you know, or could have retired in order to do that. So it's like, what can you do, you know, to help somebody else? And that's the thing. And people don't want to do that. And it's hard because you get locked into, you know, the stress of everyday life and, you know, everything else. It's like, okay, well, how do I and what sacrifice? Well, we've got people who aren't willing to make like almost no sacrifice in order for people less privileged than them to have basic health care.
Yeah.
Right. So
what if they're not going to do that? What are they going to do?
Right.
Probably nothing. You know, the only reason that they're upset now is because their health care is going to be taken away.
Right.
Yeah.
And if their health care being saved means that other people's health care is saved too, that doesn't even cross their mind.
Right.
Fact is, if they had their druthers, they would have theirs saved and the other people not.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to. I mean, this is going to be a long-term process, and I think the reason why the right has come out so strong with there's no other way to call it, but their white supremacist underpinnings right now is because they recognize what's really going on. They're the death throes of their white supremacy. You know, our demographics of our country are shifting. And our children, like my children go to school, you know, in such a diverse school, and they have friends of all different people. They don't even think twice about it.
Mm-hmm.
Younger generations are so mixed, and the older generation knows that. So they know that their their days are numbered. But you know what? They're not going to go. I can't remember when it was, like, probably, I think it was when President Obama was elected in 2008 when he won. Somebody said something to me like, "Oh, well, you know, this is going to be the big moment," and I'm like, "No. I don't think you understand how these people operate. They're going to feel like they're backed into a corner. They're like a caged animal, and they are going to fight to the death. They are not going to give up their power and their position of authority and supremacy without a serious fight."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they've done, and they're going to do it, and it's going to get worse, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And my only concern, I know, just again, demographically and everything else, their days are numbered.
Yeah.
My concern is they are vindictive, they are spiteful. I'm worried about them scorching the earth and salting it behind them.
Yeah.
So they leave nothing, because by gosh, they are not going to allow, you know, those people to run the country when they're not around.
Mm-hmm.
This is how they view it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big concern. And the only way to fight that, there's only one way to fight that, and that is to constantly get out and stand up for what you believe and vote for the candidate who's not like them, who's most likely to win.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no time at this point to have, you know, purity politics.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't my ideal candidate. I don't care if it's your ideal candidate. There's never an ideal candidate.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Stakes are too high for a protest vote.
that's right. My number one political strategy right now is keep conservatives out of office. Period. Whatever that takes. Now, after you do that, and after you get good-sized majorities, then you can start picking off people that aren't, you know, as progressive as you'd like them to.
Mm-hmm.
The right did. They've laid out the groundwork of exactly what a political strategy should be,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you know, you start at grassroots, and you start at the local level and the state level, and you build up to the federal level, and you put people in offices from dog catcher to county drain commissioner, and it doesn't matter, you know, like them, but you know what? They've got an R after their name. That's all I care about right now.
Yeah.
And they did that so much and so successfully that when the time came, then say, okay, well, we've got all this power. Now we can start primarying people in our own party.
Mm-hmm.
We can say, like, well, you're not Republican enough. You're not conservative enough. We can get rid of you because we don't matter. If we lose you, even if we lose the election, it doesn't matter because we've got all these other people and we've still got the power. The left has never done that. But it takes time. The progressives are so impatient. They want it right now. They want change, like, instantaneously. And when it doesn't happen, they get they pout and they get apathy, and then they don't vote, and then the problem gets worse, and they complain even more.
Yeah.
And that's so frustrating. I just want to, you know, beat them about the head, beat my head on the deck.
So in thinking about this white male king God figure, I'm also thinking about the Christian savior figure, the Jesus Christ savior figure, and the ways that, like, Christians are asked to embody the savior energy in a way that becomes a savior complex. So an example would be, like, I'm voting Republican, or I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's going to save us all, and in turn I'm going to save you. Like, I know what's best for you being, I don't know, some other person from me, and I'm doing not only what's best for me, but I'm doing what's best for you, because if it's what's best for me, it's also what's best for you. And so I feel like it's not only this white male king, it's not only this white male, oh, your computer's on now. It's not only this white male king image, it's also this Christ Savior image, and this idea that we must all be saviors to each other in some way, which I feel like empowers this idea, this mentality that my values must be imposed upon other people for the good of their souls.
Well, and I was thinking about this as we were talking, because I saw this on Twitter this morning. A Fox News analyst, Fox News actually tweeted this out, and they tweeted one of their analysts saying, "Who in this world puts the interest of their next door neighbor's family above the interest of theirs?" And the person who retweeted it put, "That would be Jesus. Jesus said to do that." and the whole idea that, again, we have part of how this oppressive Christianity works is to have this cosmic, distant Jesus that ignores the teachings of Jesus, the Jesus who actually told us to love our neighbor as ourselves, is not as important as a Jesus who might come back with a sword and wipe out all the evildoers. Because that Jesus, the Jesus who tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves and put the interest of our next door neighbor's family above our own, that Jesus seems kind of weak, kind of wimpy, kind of not into that so much.
That's like the hippie, homeless pacifist Jesus.
Yeah, not into that so much. Like, it's really hard to consolidate imperial power if you are, loving your neighbor. That's
So
hard.
do any of the three of us have an idea of when that, like, white, like marbly white, gray-haired, white-haired male vision of God became a thing? I'm trying to think back in my art history of like when that imagery started to be widely used and accepted.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is every culture. I took a wonderful class. Probably my favorite seminary class was called Jesus, Images, and Experiences. And every culture has made an artistic representation of Jesus. So the issue we have is not so much that enough images of Jesus weren't made or images of God weren't made. It's that at some point the white male image got placed above all the others. And my guess is that that coincided with the spreading of white male imperial power. I mean, because those things had to have gone hand in hand.
Yeah, but there's a point where you have the colonization of Europe and you have white people being colonized by other seemingly possibly less white people. Although I guess most Romans, we would consider them to be white. I don't. Rome was so big. But it's like people forget that, like, the Celtic people and the indigenous people of Britain and Europe were colonized by the people of Rome. And the people of Rome, theoretically, were kind of the modern day Italian people, I guess. So there's kind of this point in history where it wasn't just white, black. It was Roman, non-Roman. And then, we even get into the time of Charlemagne, where Charlemagne is, again, like, using this dead, bloody, battered corpse of Jesus to convert the Celtic people and to convert the pagan people of Europe. And, so I feel like it I don't know, that's just something I'm just like I'm trying to sort of track this imagery over time, and it seems to me that it wasn't really until the colonization of Africa and the slave trade that the white god becomes supreme. Because
well, if you're going to try and convert a group, what's the best way to do that? So if you're the Romans, or if you're Constantine, and you're trying to convert the Northern Europe who are white, what's the best way to do that? You're going to give them a god that looks like them. You're going to give them a god that looks like their former god. If you look at, Odin or Thor or any of those, they're white. They're white gods.
Yeah.
So that's what they're used to seeing. Something that looks like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you're not going to give them, somebody who looks Aramaic.
Right.
That's not going to fly.
Right. And if you're then trying to enslave an entire group of people, it makes sense then to make a god who looks polar opposite of that group of people that you're trying to enslave. So
because you're not like them. You're not you're not the chosen people.
Right.
It always boils down to is you're not part of the chosen group. A little bit earlier, you're talking. Derrick was talking about, people who are saying like, I don't have to worry about my neighbor. Christian. Well, they're okay about worrying about their neighbor as long as their neighbor
looks like that.
Well, belongs to their little.
Yeah.
So to them, Jesus saying, "Love thy neighbor," they're fine with that. But again, there's always an asterisk, and the asterisk is, but they have to be exactly like this. Yeah. Neighbor. They limit the definition of neighbor that they can justify not helping somebody different than them.
Right. Which is why, we as those of us who are Christians, if we're looking for it, find the radical nature of Jesus defining neighbor with a completely foreign alien group in the Samaritans.
Right.
So, there is like a sliver of hope in your piece here. Because
where
there is, I swear I found some.
Okay.
But one of the things you said, do you know what does change the beliefs of fundamentalists sometimes? When something becomes personal.
Yes.
Many fundamentalists have changed their minds about the LGBT community once their loved ones started coming out of the closet. Many have not, but again, I think one of the things where I continue to both hold out hope and be disappointed by the church is the possibility to have a relationship, a meeting with an other in the context of the community of faith. And sometimes we do that really well. Most of the time we do that really poorly. And we still come back to the fact that as both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X said, that 12 o'clock on Sunday morning is still the most segregated hour of the week. But there's still, I think, and this is where big cities do a lot of things. Being in a big city or going to a big university, this really is why a lot of people have these kind of changes of politics in college or in their first job after college. It's because they get exposed to difference. They get exposed to the other, and they might have a be in the same dorm or work in the same office building or, you know, maybe go to the same church. And that relationship is actually where the change begins to happen.
And
Oh, absolutely. But in small rural communities, that change is highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Because they are not going to allow outsiders in, and outsiders don't want to go there for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're never going to, and they discourage their children from going out and going to a cultural diverse university, or moving to the big city or whatever for those reasons. So it can happen. All real deep change in belief systems, usually most of it happens through a very dramatic and traumatic event.
Mhm.
Like the example I used where, you know, people change their minds about, you know, maybe having a gay son or a gay daughter. It's like the reason why they change their minds isn't because, and I have a father that did this. It's very adamant anti-gay. And I used to get just on him and have major fights with him. Well, then I'm the oldest of 10, so one of my siblings came out as gay, and he didn't do anything. But well, my parents got divorced, and when he got remarried, one of his favorite grandsons, or his stepsons, came out of the closet. And when it did, all of a sudden my dad changed his views about. He had his come to Jesus LGBT moment, and he was like, all of a sudden, I was like, oh well, I think I understand now. I'm kind of okay about it. And the only reason he did that is because he really loved that kid. You know, he had to make a choice. He had to make a choice of either I keep beliefs about gays and abandon this kid who I adore, or I change my views. It had to be personal. So, but now when it comes to something like, say, race, with people who never ever really meet somebody on a personal level, somebody who's different than they are.
Yeah.
Well, they have no reason to.
Yeah.
But this is the fear of, you know, the evangelical and the fundamentalist movement right now in this country, is they know because of the diversity of this country, and because there are more people of color, because there are more mixed marriages, and so on and so on. They know, and they fear that. They don't want that to happen. It's like they're fearing something. They're crossing a bridge that doesn't even exist. They're afraid of something that doesn't even exist yet, because they've been told that this is a problem. This is evil.
Yeah. So going back to this idea that, you know, Sunday morning is the most segregated time of the week, we can't separate. I don't feel like we can separate the evolution of Christianity for Black people in America and the evolution of Christianity for white people in America without understanding the roots in slavery. There would not be Black people in America if it weren't for slavery.
Right.
There wouldn't be white people in America if it weren't for European colonization.
Yeah.
And the Christianity that comes out of European colonization for white people is a different Christianity in many ways than the Christianity that grew out of the conversion of slaves. Gospel is a music form that comes out of deep pain and suffering from a people who were enslaved, who were taught that God was on the side of the master. And so I feel like this segregation on Sunday morning runs so much deeper than just culture.
Yeah.
It runs deeper into the roots of Christianity in this country. And I feel like so many white Christians aren't willing to acknowledge that Christianity was used to justify the enslavement of other people, number one. And number two, a lot of white people don't know whether or not their ancestors owned slaves. And it's almost like there's a relief for a white person when it's like, oh, my ancestors immigrated after the Civil War.
Right.
Like there's a relief there because there wasn't a direct contribution to slavery.
Well, even if there was, people, look how long ago slavery was. Yeah, my ancestor may have owned slaves, but my grandpa didn't, and my parents didn't, I don't. So what does that have to do with me?
Right.
They can divorce themselves from any sense of really compassion, empathy, and understanding of what's going on easily that way, because they and this is one of the things that frustrated me when President Obama was elected. All of a sudden, it was like, well, look, black man president, so therefore all racial sins of America got magically washed away. And it's like, oh, no. Just wait a few years and you're going to see that's the absolute opposite.
Yeah.
It drew them out even more so. But because they don't want to. It's painful. It's painful to say, like, whether you do something wrong, but it's painful to say, like, I have benefited greatly from really abhorrent behavior from people just like me, and maybe my relatives. That's hard for some people to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why people, but it is because they personalize it, because who they are is completely wrapped up. Their self-identity is tied up into these things. And so they're afraid that if they criticize that, they're really criticizing who they are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that brings up for me this. So there's this idea that's been really ringing in my head since the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, which is that, like, on a business economics level, I dream of a world where no one profits off the illness, the medical sickness or illness of another person, and no one profits off of the imprisonment of another person. No one profits off of the education of another person. That somehow we can establish some basic human rights and that all organizations and companies that provide services that we deem to be these human rights are required to be nonprofit organizations, where all of the money that's extra, miraculously at the end of the year, gets reinvested back into the infrastructure of the company to better serve the people.
Right. Well, I used to teach a medical ethics class, and ethics, you always had, cases where, every situation that comes up, every policy in a hospital or any kind of healthcare policy, and you have to say, can somebody personally benefit from this? And if they can, then there's an incentive for them to create the situation where they will benefit. Yep. And that's unethical. That's completely barred. So when you have prison systems where it's privatized, well, then they're going to make sure that, there's always people coming into that prison system. There's always stronger sentences than there needs to be because they need that money. The same thing with healthcare. If the incentive is to not make them better, then you're never going to really make them better. Your job is to, run tests on them. There's a reason why we have an opiate problem in this country.
Mm-hmm.
People profit off of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain things, like there's nothing wrong with privatization, but privatization of public services is always detrimental to the public. And the right completely for whatever well, I know what reason, but they claim that that's the opposite. They say that that's the best thing. That's the way to make it, that's the way to make public services better and run more efficiently. Well, anybody who's worked in the private sector knows that big private companies are not that efficient. They're not. They have just as much BS and just as much, infighting and waste, people hanging on that should have been fired 10 years ago as the public sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But for some reason, it's the conservatives have always held up the private sector for this, and that's what they're doing right now. They are going to gut of the public sector as humanly possible.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking of Hamilton and the rap battle between the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists.
Yeah.
And it's like people don't realize how deeply the political views and perspectives in our government today kind of are current day embodiments of those two perspectives, those dueling, battling perspectives of, okay, are we a federalist? Are we taking a federalist approach to this where the national government is good, or are we taking a Democratic Republican status on this where the states have the rights and the federal government needs to stay small? So, obviously we could go on and on and on and on. Forsetti, thank you so much. I've genuinely enjoyed myself for the last hour.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been amazing.
Despite our beginning technical
where can people find your writing?
They can find it on Tumblr, Forsetti on Tumblr, or they can go to my Facebook page, which is Forsetti's Justice on Facebook. I always post all my writing there too.
Cool.
Awesome. And I love that your writing is stream of consciousness and that you just fully own like any typos or grammar mistakes or anything like that, because you just want to get it out and get it out there. And if you like proofread it too hard, you'll second guess it. And I just love that aspect of your writing.
Yeah, there's not much editing going on at all.
And yet it's still incredibly compelling and really well thought out. So I thank you for that. Amy, do you have anything going on that people need to know about?
I don't know. I'm in the middle of moving.
People don't necessarily need to know that, but
I mean, I'm in the midst of move. It's like my aunt passed away at the end of January, and it's now the middle of February. I mean, the middle of March, and I'm moving, and I'm moving for the next few days, and that's really it. But I will be opening my spiritual direction practice to new clients at the beginning of April, which I'm very excited about. And I will also be teaching an interplay class that is improvised movement, storytelling, and music the fourth Friday evening of March. So other than that, that's what's on my plate. How about you?
Cool. So I started a new job at the beginning of February, and I've been doing a lot less creating, but I do have a couple things that are kind of in the wings, and be able to announce those more down the road, and hopefully that will include some conversation about some collaboration that Amy and I are doing with other folks who are doing podcasts and shows like ours. And super excited that one of my podcast co-conspirators, Carol Howard Merritt, will be on our next episode in 2 weeks, talking about her wonderful book, Healing Spiritual Wounds, which is just phenomenal. And for those of us who have some baggage dealing with the oppressive systems of the church, This is a great book.
Yeah, her book is Healing Spiritual Wounds, Reconnecting with a Loving God After Experiencing a Hurtful Church.
Yep.
And we'll be talking about that with her. So I'll post all of these links to Forsetti's Tumblr and to Carol's book in our Facebook page. And again, thank you, Forsetti. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
We'll have to check back with you in like 6 months or so and see how everything's going.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
come back.
All right, excellent. Well, this has been Drinks with Amy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, cheers.
Bye. I love your music in the background.